Hello, I hope you all are doing so well. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to talk today a little bit about what we are doing in this process in our lives on a daily basis in terms of our energetic programming. What this experience really is, at least right now in these moments. We're having so much energy, so many messages, so much external information coming at us. How do we deal with all of this? What is the purpose of all of this? And I have always said my own way of working with energy, I apologize, there's a lot going on in the building I'm in today here at the office, so I apologize for the background noise. But I've always said that my own personal experiences in my life, they're stories. They are the ways that I learn how to work with my own energy and the ways that I observe, let's say, the energy fields and understand how all of this kind of comes together in a way that we can consciously then evolve our light, but also devolve our programming, because we are program-based humans. We come into this world, we come into these systems with a set of givens, and those are the programs that have existed for a very long time here in this realm. And so much of the journey of being a human is about recognizing where that is, not just within our daily life, but within our mind. And for me, my work is very much focused in the mental realm. It's not that that's all that there is, but I've always said it begins and ends with the mind. And when you can see the programs and start to feel them and see them play out in your experience and how you get constantly pulled back into them in all of these ways and all of these spaces, all of these events and these people that exist in your life, because you've been dealing with this all along, right? And it's just in this now moment where we are coming in to finally see this and open it up and to see the truth of the reality of this. So everything that you have experienced and gone through is going to be a clue as to where your programming is most intense and how you're going to learn to move out of this. And I wanted to share my most recent experience, and I'm calling this the Hero Saga, because, well, first and foremost, because the main character is named Hero. But we're all familiar with the hero's journey, right? Which is essentially this concept of how to write a story, in that there's a main character that goes off on an adventure, and they encounter, let's say, this kind of counterforce where they're put into a situation that they must overcome, right? So they basically come out triumphant, and as a result of being triumphant over this force, they come out with a deeper understanding of who they are. And I think we look at what's going on now and we aspire to go on this hero's journey in the sense that when we go off into the wilderness or go off on this adventure, we will find ourselves and we will realize who we truly are through all of this and come back a changed and enlightened person. For me personally, I have found it is quite the opposite. It's a process of going out and experiencing adversity, but that adversity is actually the program, and the pressure of that program coming in so deeply and having to look at it and then understand I'm not actually that program at all. Actually, that program is showing me what is wrong, what is covering up the truth of who I am. So not actually at all having to find ourselves, it's just uncovering the truth of who we are. And so much in this world plays to the lie that we're broken, that something is wrong with us. The messages and the transmissions in our heads will also enforce this idea that we have to find something, that there's something that's missing, that there's something that we need to overcome And really, that's not it at all. What we really need to do is to release, to let go, to allow this garbage to leave. And how do we do that? But first, we have to recognize where it's actually playing out and the role that we are playing that enables it to stay in motion. So a few months back, we had adopted a dog, and I've talked about this on and off because it's been quite an adventure. And it was unexpected. My daughter has been talking about wanting a dog for a very long time. We always had several dogs in the home, but once I divorced and we moved and we downsized, the animals up to that point, I think we were left with one dog at the time, and she passed away several years ago now. And so we just never got another animal because our yard is very small. It's not fenced in and not really conducive to having a lot of animals running around. So we kind of just adjusted to life without her. But then, my daughter started saying, I really miss having a dog. Like, it was an important part of my life, and it was such a joy and so much fun to have. I said, yeah, you're right. It would be nice, but all these things, right? So, and then of course, with the assistance of her therapist, I was like, all right, maybe I need to revisit this. Maybe it would be a really good thing. Of course, we kind of do feel sequestered in our lives. And there were many reasons I was like, it would be wonderful to have, but also, do I really need all this extra work? And you know how it goes, right? Of course I'll walk the dog. Mom, I'm going to love this thing to death. Like, now I know, and I appreciate not having a dog. I appreciate what I've been missing, right? So, okay. Anyway, so we started looking and, all these things, and there were several times where it was like, oh yeah, this dog, but then she would spend time with them, and then she would start to feel overwhelmed because they were large or kind of, very kind of muscular, like very strong dogs. And if you're not, in the place of being in charge or being in your power, that can be a little much. So we kind of were learning this along the way. And it's interesting because in the past when I was married, right, it's very much up to my husband at that time. He's like, I want this. And he would just kind of go out and get it. And then we'd have to figure it out and adjust. And so this was a bit of a different process now, to be in control of this kind of evolvement of this situation and this desire. So we had gone to a kennel, and out of all the dogs there, which it's not huge, right? They had maybe 15 animals there, dogs anyway. And out of all of them, she tells me she wants this one, which was like the largest dog that was there. And so I just was kind of asking, and they said, yeah, telling me about the people who had brought them in and how he's kind of aggressive with other dogs and he needs some training. Like, it's, they kind of were filling in the pieces of what they knew as well, saying that, well, they probably got him as a puppy and then he just got, grew up and got too big and they were moving and didn't want to take him, whatever, couldn't take him, whatever the reason was. Wasn't really sure how old he was, right? But my daughter was convinced because this dog was so focused on whatever was happening in the kennel, wasn't really paying attention to the people. And yet when she went down, she crouched down next to his cage and he came and sat next to her. And so for her, this was like, did you see this? Like, he responded to me and responded to my presence. And I was like, yeah, huge dog, no room for it. I don't know anything about animals. Yes, small ones, fine. You can control them just because the size is so insignificant, right? But something like this, I was not comfortable with. So, and we had left, and then she spent the week kind of crying. Like, I want this dog. I love this dog. I was like, you know what? We're going to go. We'll meet him, and you'll see that he's too much. Just like a couple of other dogs that we had already kind of interacted with. I was like, fine, let's go. But I also felt it was important that she experienced this, right? Because there's a history in our family, and a lot of this came from my ex-husband, right? Who was very impulsive. It was like whatever he wanted, he acquired, and I had to deal with the ramifications of it, right? It's like there's not a whole lot of thought. It's just this desire, want, let's get, and all these kinds of things. And so I see that in my daughter as well. So I felt it was very important that we go through this process of how do we eliminate, how do we find the best solution for what you're wanting, and do we need to make compromises? You know, we live in a certain space and we have to fit into these kind of rules and guidelines. So we went, and the dog was insane. It was like bucking like a bronco when the guy brought it out, right? And just kind of losing its mind. And it was interesting because the other thing about this too was that I kept getting told like people wanted to adopt it, right? But it would not show well at all. Like within the first 5 minutes, they're like, it's too much, he's too crazy. And even as this dog was coming out, like you could see all the men in the room and they're like, oh, you can't handle, oh, that's too much, you know, and everyone's like kind of like, who are you, right? It's just me and my young daughter, and like they're all these, everyone, it seemed like the men were the ones who wanted this dog because it's very large, it has a huge presence, right? This big shepherd, for protection and whatever else. Like it's very masculine and manly. And here we were, right? Like not knowing really anything about dogs besides the fact that we owned several, that, you know, it just was conducive to our life at the time. We had the yard, we had all the stuff. So we take this dog out, and after a few minutes he had settled down, and I said to my daughter, I'm like, okay, why don't you walk him? Let's see, you know. And I remember sitting watching her and noticing that every time he bumped into her, he would kind of like self-correct and respond to that. You know, and I think that was the one thing that, again, I don't know anything about dogs. I wouldn't say I have an eye or an understanding for them at all. But I suppose looking back now, there was a part of me, right? We could say this inner knowing, certainly didn't feel that at the time, that's what I was picking up on, was the ability for him to respond to correction, even though she wasn't necessarily correcting him, right? So, and then we just kind of hung out with him. He eventually kind of just laid down, and I was just kind of petting him and grabbing his paws and making sure he wasn't going to actually, you know, bite or do anything like that with humans. And so I kind of was putting him through the ringer a little bit, you know, just to make sure, because I was like, also, it kind of wasn't making sense what they were saying, right? Like he's this huge dog and he's been in a kennel all his life because they're a professional couple, and so he hasn't been socialized. And I was like, okay, it doesn't really make sense. He's kind of just laying there. He seems happy to be hanging out, you know, and we spent quite a while with him, to the point where people from the kennel were actually starting to come outside and be like, we didn't even know you were still here. Like, oh my God, who is this dog? He's a totally different animal, right? So almost as if he had never had the opportunity to be outside or with people long enough for people to see his kind of true nature. Although anytime another dog would come out, he would start kind of growling and getting a bit aggressive. So there was that issue, but I, you know, in the end, it was like I was trying to make a decision about bringing this dog home, and I just felt like I did not have a reason not to. Like I couldn't come up with an excuse, you know, because they had the name of a trainer, specifically for German Shepherds, you know, and I just felt like the way he was behaving around my daughter and just kind of laying there and being like just so normal. Looking back again, right, it's like it wasn't adding up in my head. It wasn't making sense. So we decided to take him home. And I think in the back of my mind, I always thought, well, okay, if it doesn't work out, we'll have to bring him back, of course, you know, just like, but at the time I couldn't, again, I didn't have a good reason that we couldn't bring him home. So I ended up bringing him home, and things were really great until, you know, at one point we put him in his kennel, which he did really well with. He was fine until he saw the cat, right? And they said he's good with cats. They had cats wandering around the kennels. Everything should be fine. But not, you know, and then this is kind of when all hell started breaking loose, and he started barking and just all this stuff, and like, you know, and they say there's like this period of time, obviously, where the animal has to adjust, and then, you know, it's even longer than that till they understand that they're not, who knows, right, but that you're not going to send them away again, right, that they're kind of here to stay. And so I thought, okay, I'll give him the 2 months, okay, I'll give him the 3 months, and then we'll see what happens. And all along, you know, this kind of, we adopted him right before the lockdown started too. So that added another layer of like, oh God, now we can't even get him neutered. can't take him for training, So basically living with this dog who, yeah, I would take him on walks, and he certainly would get really excited when he would see other animals. And so, of course, I didn't trust him because they kept saying he's so aggressive, and like people would come with their own dogs trying to adopt him, and they would go at each other, to the point where I finally started like getting up really early and taking him for walks late at night so we could avoid other animals, right? So this became my life for like 3 months then, of just trying to survive with this animal. Again, couldn't get him, into training, couldn't get anything taken care of through the vet because it was just emergencies that they were doing, right? So basically living, it just became a life of hell for like 3 months for me, right? Because I didn't trust to let my kids walk him because I didn't know how he was going to respond. He's a 90-pound dog, like I had one time I was like, let's not use the pitch collar. That's so awful. Let me just put a regular collar on. And he practically dragged me down the driveway. So that was the last of that attempt, and I just did not feel comfortable. So kind of took it upon myself to just deal with this until the lockdown, whatever. In the meantime, I was talking to my friend one day, and she said, oh yeah, we're adjusting to life with their new dog, this new puppy, German Shepherd. And I was like, wait, we don't have a puppy. Like, what are you talking about? I didn't even tell you I adopted a dog. And it took me a few minutes to realize she had, at the same time, somehow also adopted a German Shepherd, rescued actually. So kind of the same situation. And so she starts telling me, and I was like, wait, hold on a second. Like, we also adopted a dog. So she starts telling me all these things, right? She's very much about animals and does a lot of research, and then started telling me about also a kennel that they, boarding kennel, where they did training and all this kind of stuff. And they were planning on sending their dog there. Long story short, right? Like, there is no short version of this, because what happened then was that I'm like, oh God, this is great. I can send them off. They do a lodge and learn, which is where you send them away for 10 days and they will train them. And I thought, yeah, I will pay anything to have you like rehabilitate this animal, because I have, again, really don't know what I'm doing. Then I found out he had worms, and so you obviously highly contagious. You can't send a dog away with this. So we had to wait another month until this cleared up. As soon as I got the test results back, finally, when they came back negative, I was like, okay, he's going the next day. So we took him, and they do a little bit of an evaluation, of course, right, before you kind of just leave them, and of what to expect and all this kind of stuff. And so we were talking about the fact that, okay, the kennel told me he was aggressive, and like he was really hard to adopt out because he wasn't, behaving well and all these things. And so she started asking me, have you ever felt the need to muzzle him, or has he ever displayed all these other things? And I was like, I've never felt that though. I've never felt afraid of him. I've never felt like he was actually going to attack another dog. And then my mind started kind of like almost backtracking, like, wait, hold on a second. He is 90 pounds. Like, he did drag me down the driveway once without that collar on. Like, if he really wanted to, if he was intent on going after another animal, like, he would find a way to do it. I cannot, like, he's enormous. And when that weight is all kind of in front of you, if he gets out from underneath you, like, forget it, right? Game over. So as she started to say all these things, I was like, and I had just seen an episode of Caesar talking about a lot of times when dogs are barking and they're looking aggressive, right? It's really insecurity. And I started to think, well, maybe this is what this is. Maybe it's not as bad as I'm thinking. And the way she was asking me these questions, right? She was already suspecting there was something else going on here. Anyway, we ended up, so it was normally a 10-day program. As soon as they hear it's an aggressive dog, they want to do 14 days, right? So they're like, okay, well, we'll call you if, we think we can't help or whatever, She's like, I've only had one case of a dog that was aggressive, but it ended up like the family really wanted him to be trained, you know, and was really willing to do whatever it would take. And so he had to stay for a month, you know. Worst case scenario, he would have to stay there for a month to kind of get over this. So, you know, we left him there and then didn't hear anything. And they said, no news is good news. And I thought, God, I really hate that, you know. But I was like, okay, I'm going to wait like 4 or 5 days and see what happens. And at one point, and I think it was actually even longer than that I didn't even call to see what was really going on. Because the next time that I talked to the trainer, it had been already 10 days. And she said, you know what, he actually can come home. She said, we've had him playing with other dogs from the very beginning. Never had any problems with him. Yes, he gets a little aggressive because he isn't neutered. He's got, you know, raging hormones. But other than that, he was totally fine. And she said he actually has had someone invested a lot of money in him and gave him training. She said as soon as she had started working with him, it's like something switched in his brain and he knew exactly what was expected of him, you know. And so she said he's really a smart dog. He's well trained, which doesn't bode well for my, right? Like if I had known, like whatever. But then I was like, but even the people at the kennel who are around dogs all the time and seem like they knew things, you know, it's a different situation. So, you know, whatever. We ended up bringing him home, totally changed animal. And I do think he also needed that time away to kind of reset himself and rehabilitate, because even just the things that he was doing, kind of running through the house and like going after the cats and like barking out the window, like none of that behavior was there anymore. So he definitely needed this kind of time away and this reset, right? And unfortunately, I think, or I know that part of the problem now is that I was told this story, right? And so, yes, long-winded, drawn out, I apologize. It's really hard for me to just kind of jump over details without kind of, it's hard for me to skip things in my mind. That's all I can say. I am mental. But anyway, I could not believe the difference walking him, right? And he does do this thing where he starts to breathe. Like as soon as he sees kids or animals, he will start like heavy breathing, like he gets really excited, you know. And I think that's the thing that would kind of set me off, and I would go into this fear mode, like, oh, they said he's so aggressive, I have to be careful, you know. But he was really okay, and even had an experience where he went up to a couple dogs, they sniffed, and he was good, you know. And so when he came home, I went through this very emotional, kind of stressful release of like feeling totally exhausted. I was like, oh my God, I have lived in hell for the last 3 months based on a story. Now, of course, yes, okay, his behavior somewhat, there were, you know, he would do things that, but my response was based on the history that I had been told about him, which wasn't even true. And this is what I'm saying about the experience that we're having now, is what we think we know about ourselves is based on stories that we have been told. We have been programmed to believe that we don't matter, something's wrong with us, you know, we are just not high achievers, we're not overachievers. Like we can see other people achieving things, and yet it's like, why is my life not working out in this way? And it has nothing to do with who you actually are. It's the level of programming and the level of messages that have been pumped into your head as thoughts, and then therefore becomes a reality. And it's not just in this lifetime, right? It's like based over all of these lifetimes. So it's in the DNA, it's in the cells, it's in your ancestry, it's in your lineage. So not only do you feel it, you also see it in the closest people around you, right? And there's a reason for that. There's a reason you're born into the family that you're born into. So all of these things reinforce these wrong ideas about who we think we are and where we're going. And it is this, last week I started getting a lot of messages around this programming. Essentially what has been done is aversion therapy, right? So we have been programmed to avoid the very things we need. We have been programmed to avoid our own selves. When we feel these energies coming up inside of us, and I've been seeing this a lot lately, and I even experienced this a long time ago too. I was started to have this feeling inside of me, and I think I've talked about this before, but I was sitting in a room where they were channeling, and the person who was channeling said to me, that feeling that you're feeling is excitement. And yet in my mind, I was thinking, I was getting this nervous energy in my stomach, and I was like, oh God, this is fear. Like, what am I afraid of? And they said, no, you're excited. And I was like, what? Right? But it's like, we have gotten to know certain emotions and certain feelings in our body, and we've labeled them to be things that they actually are not. And a lot of times, of course, this is due to the fact that it's not safe to shine. It's not safe to be who we are because we were traumatized as a result of being that. And of course, we can all look back to childhood at those points where we were in our exuberance and we were punished for it, right? Settle down. Don't act out. Who do you think you are? And especially in these times right now, it's really this potent antidote for this exuberance, right? It's like we're looking at the world around us. Everyone's freaking out. Nobody knows what's happening. Everyone's in confusion, right? Like, what should I post? What sign should I carry? I want you to think that I'm all for humanity. Don't attack me, right? People are really scared right now. And yet, we look out and really we're supposed to be in the joy and supposed to be in our light. And there's this feeling right now that many of us have, right? It's like there is this undercurrent of joy that we can feel. And are we really allowed to go there? Is it okay to be in that? And I struggle with this, right? I bounce back and forth with this, like looking at people around me, looking at people in my family, like everybody's suffering right now. Everyone's confused and worried about the future. And I'm just not. And then I start to think, is there something wrong with me? But this is the pattern of our lives that we have been playing out, right? We feel that there's more than this. And yet the system keeps telling us that's not right, that's wrong. Who do you think you are? What are you doing? When I first brought that dog home, I couldn't sleep for 3 days, right? I thought, this is insane. What the F did I just do? Our house is so tiny. He can't even turn around without hitting his face on the wall. He's huge. I couldn't sleep for days and days and days. And yet there was something inside of me that was like, but I don't get it. Like, everything that I observed, there was nothing that said this was bad. There was nothing that said this was a bad idea, even though logically what I was hearing and maybe even the way he presented himself at some points was like, okay, this could be really, really awful. But I just wasn't feeling that internally. But I couldn't explain it. But I look back now and I'm like, oh my God, this is the light at work. Because not only did we send this dog off to be trained for 10 days, right? It reset him. Plus he already had other training. He is like the perfect dog, for us. And we really won the lottery. It's like, and he's older, he's probably like 3 years old. So he's out of that like crazy puppy stage, but yet still young enough where he has this vibrance and this joy that he brings into our lives, And yeah, I lived in 3 months of hell, but that was because of my brain. And I was basing my mind and my thoughts on what other people had told me. People that I thought were experts in animals. And then it's like, why did I have to wait 3 months before this kennel opened up or to get over this health issue that he had? And it's like, maybe did I just need to be immersed in that hell to realize the level of programming? And this was a minimal, this is like nothing compared to what we experience on a daily basis, right? But the emotional releases that I was having around the situation when we had first dropped him off at the kennel for training, it was like, I really wasn't even worried because she had given us this feeling, right, of like, I think maybe there's something else going on. We'll see what's going on, where I had this hope of like, maybe I didn't make the worst mistake in my life and it's going to be okay, But it was also an ancestral pattern that was being released because my own family has a habit of not taking care of things before they become a problem, right? Or it's like when a problem does show up, it's like, well, now we're stuck with it. We have to live with it. There's not a whole lot of proactiveness, right? Or like foresight about like, this is what life could be like. Let's create this goal and let's move towards it. It's more about whatever happens to us is our lot in life, and that's just the way it is, right? We're going to work, we're going to save for retirement, and we're just going to keep doing this generation after generation. Really not living in joy and exuberance at all, right? And that's kind of what I was experiencing. This release of this past history, of this ancestry that says, you know what, when you get a problem, well, now you just gotta live with it. Like, it's gonna be that way for the rest of your life. There's no solution, which is crazy, I know, that life is like that, but that's kind of the way it is in our family. And so there was a transition period there. While the dog was gone, I was like, oh my God, you know, and also wondering, like, am I going to miss him? Because what if he comes back and I'm like, I really love life without him, right? Which didn't happen. It only took like 3 or 4 days, and I was like missing him greatly. So, which was interesting because I didn't think I would. So it's all worked out in this perfected way. But when we did get him back, I also went through this strange release of like, taking him for a walk in the neighborhood, and suddenly he's like not pulling on me, and it's not a miserable experience, because walking him had become a miserable experience, you know, getting dragged around and like not knowing how do I correct him. Like, I want him to be able to go off and pee, but also like if he does that, then he just thinks he can wander off anywhere, right? You know, it's like, how do I do this? And so the trainer was wonderful. She trained him to walk. There's a release word for him to go. He comes back, you go on, you know, and I was like, I had no idea that life can be this easy and wonderful, you know? So you really can get everything that you ask for. It just doesn't always come in the timing or the way that you would think, right? Instead of adopting the perfect dog, we had to learn, we had to wait, we had to allow for all these pieces to come together. And this is really what we're going through with the release of these programs. It's about noticing where these things come in. And I always say it's good to be within dissatisfaction about your life, because this is how you see the programs come up, right? It's that bypassing, it's that love and light, it's that I'm just going to be in joy and I'm not going to pay attention to anything outside here that does not bring me happiness, right? It's not necessarily about being that way. It is about noticing what's going on in your world that's saying, yeah, we need something different here. This is not the way it should be. And then being open to the answers coming in, though, because a lot of times what will happen is that the answers come in, and this is where I was talking about this aversion therapy, right? We're like, no, this is too good to be true. And it doesn't feel like it's too good to be true. It just feels really freaking uncomfortable and awkward, right? And we're like, why am I having this response? This must be awful, right? When actually it's coming in to help you. And that's kind of how I felt when I dropped the dog off. My mind was like spinning, like, who am I to deserve this? Like, someone's taking my dog and they're going to bring him back to me, and it's going to be this wonderful experience. Like, shouldn't I suffer? Shouldn't I have to train him myself? Shouldn't I go to all these classes where I don't actually know what the heck I'm doing, and then I have to do homework with him and like try to fit this into my schedule now? Like, I have to practice all the time with him. Like, but that's my ancestry, right? That's in my lineage. It's like hard work, which actually never leads to anything because you're still stuck in this rut. That's a massive program in my experience, in my field. Aversion to help. Although when we do hold these programs so deeply, like I said, even when we see the help coming in, it feels wrong, right? But this is where we have to be open now to being in a different way, to saying, yeah, I'm here as the light. I am perfect. Where am I being triggered? You know, for me, not only are we trained to avoid what is a match to our light, we're also trained to respond to these energies inside of us and avoid them. What I mean by this is, and I've talked about this before, where I will be in my house trying to get things done, right? All of a sudden this energy comes up through me and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to leave. I got to go on a drive. Like, this feels awful. I need to like clear my head. I don't like this, right? It's this negative energy coming into my space. And now I'm working to get rid of it. And like, what the heck is wrong with me? And I spend all this time working to feel better putting aside the things, the physical things I should be doing because my energy feels so shitty. And part of it is just that, I had this thought the other day too. It's like, you know, where I've said, it's like, if you don't realize, if you're not there to claim your space and your energy, something else will, right? We live in this kind of vacuum where it's like, if you're not aware of your power, you're not aware of your light, this is why we have other energies that continually come in to feed and siphon off of us, right? Instead of saying, I exist for my experience, my life, my mission, first and foremost, you have to, right? It's like the mask in the airplane. You have to take care of yourself first. What happens is that we were born into this system where everything else takes priority over who we are, right? Most of us are born into these highly dysfunctional families which teach us this is the way we are supposed to be. Our needs do not matter. When we voice our needs, the hammer comes down even harder on us. And so we learn to sequester ourselves. We learn to stay quiet. We learn that our needs are not valid. I took the dog back to this, they have a group training class now. It's like level 2 training, you know, for hand commands and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, he doesn't need it. I just need to go, and I need to see him interacting with other dogs, and I need to learn, you know, that he can do this and he can handle it. I need to see that, prove to myself so that I can shift my brain and my energy to match who he really is, right? Not create an animal who is dysfunctional because of my own dysfunction. And so we were waiting in the lobby before the class started, and, you know, it was funny because everyone was on the same page, right? Like, oh, the dogs are freaking out, and we're all like, oh my God, stay away from each other, and like, you know, they all have their own issues, and so Hero was doing just fine, which, by the way, we renamed him, okay? And it was not the plan, but his name was awful, and I refused to even like transition him because he didn't even seem like he knew his name anyway. But it's funny because his name used to be Playboy, right? And now he is this, which we talk about divine masculine and all this kind of distortion in these relationships, right? I think it's kind of funny that was actually his name. But my kids renamed him Hero, based on the movie Big Hero 6, actually, which I believe is essentially, I don't know if the writer is Japanese or the story itself it must have been, because the characters, I think it's Hero as in Hirro, but we just spell it ERO because nobody would ever get that right anyway. But in that story, you know, Hero is the young boy actually, who, now I'm totally getting off track, right? But his older brother died. His older brother was in this like MIT or something, that kind of technical institute, right? He was like this engineering genius who created this this concept. It's like a robot, but it was this kind of inflatable robot, which was supposed to be a caretaker. It was supposed to be like a nurse, right, where it would administer healthcare and these kinds of things. But also it was kind of this, it became this emotional support character for this young boy because his older brother ended up dying in this laboratory. Something happened, and his older brother ended up dying, and so he went through this whole journey, right, of rediscovering himself, finding all these people who were just as strange as he was, right, very technical, very much into engineering. He felt like an outsider, but finding his tribe in the midst of this adversity. So, and of course I totally forgot what I was going to say, but oh yeah, so we were in this group, you know, waiting in the lobby, and there was another dog that was just like so excited it wouldn't stop like panting and whining and whatever, and so Hero kept like, what's going on? And I thought, okay, let's just let him, they seemed like they wanted to talk, right? But but he gets to the point where he can't, like, okay, say hi and that's enough, right? Like, come back over here and quit. And so I almost started panicking, right? And so right away, again, in hindsight, at the time I didn't realize it, right away though, he starts to get a little bit mouthy and aggressive in a way that he's just kind of growling, right? And I'm like, okay, what the hell, you know? We were doing so good, and then somewhere I got triggered and I went back into my panic mode, which he picked up on, which is really annoying. But I do think a huge part of this, right, is teaching me how to control the messages and the energy that I'm sending out into the world, and looking at these subconscious responses that I have, right? Because what happened then was that the trainer took him. As soon as we walked in the room, she's like, oh, okay, he was already getting like, rah. And she's like, get over here, you're not me. You know, she takes him and like kind of resets him, walking him around, and then he's just like laying there like a baby again, right? Like you would never know that this guy could even be capable of growling at other dogs the way that she just snaps him back in. Which was interesting and important for me to see also. But she started saying like, oh, this guy doesn't think his mom can protect herself. Oh, that triggered me, right? I started like tearing up, and I was like, oh my God, like what is going on here? It was just supposed to be about him being aggressive and me like holding on to the story that he was an aggressive dog, right? So now she says, oh, he doesn't think she can take care of herself or protect herself, you know? And I started thinking, oh my God, this started bringing up all kinds of stuff about my marriage. Because my ex-husband was certainly aggressive and abusive towards me. But I just started thinking about how, okay. And it wasn't just in that moment in the class, right? It was even like after class, I started having this weird, like, what the hell? My mind feels like it's spinning and all these pieces are like trying to move around and come together and let stuff go. But I realized too, and of course this would be true, right? You know, they say that narcissists will seek out their victims. And I know there are different levels, right? Like there are those who really do target people. Like they really do look and see what your response is going to be, and they do test you. Like they're really like high level psychopaths. But there are those like lesser mental ones that just, it's really like if they do something, it's like, are you going to stand up to them or not, right? And if you stand up to them, it's like they just kind of subconsciously know like this is going to be too much trouble or whatever, right? It's not like a conscious testing that they do. But I have the thought that, you know what, yeah, if I had been more in my power and if I wasn't so naive and I was a different kind of person, that relationship would have never taken off. You know, we would have never gotten off the ground because there's so much that I just would not have put up with from him. So, you know, I think it's a struggle when we talk about how do we release out of these programs. And I struggle when I talk to clients too, because I will say things like, okay, well, we allow this, right? And it's not like in a shameful way, like, oh, you're just allowing all this to happen to you. It's that, but it's more than that, right? And so yet this program is already running, like we're born with this shit in place. And yet in our maturity now, our consciousness through our human mind, we can step back and say, okay, what is the behavior that I'm doing, or what am I not saying no to that is subconsciously giving this person permission to come towards me still, right? So where am I not, and people will say, oh, you have to put up boundaries, you have to have boundaries, exercise your boundaries. And it's like, what is that? You know, like just say no. Well, first of all, sometimes like you can't say no. You start having these emotions and you're like, but they didn't ask for anything. It wasn't a big deal. Like it didn't feel like it warranted this no, right? And it's like, but it's also learning like, where does the normal interaction end and where does it move into this person actually is coming to you to take something from you, you know? And it's going to be different for everybody. And that's the problem. You know, it's very subtle. But you have to work it out and you have to figure it out, and you're going to get tested over and over once you start to realize that this is a pattern that you have, right? So obviously, you know, in hindsight, I see my ex major issues, but also obviously I had major issues that I could even be in the same room with him with that kind of shit. You know, looking back now, I'm like, oh my God, look at all these examples. It's like, oh, okay. I just have a tendency to say whatever you want. I'm so flexible. I'll go along with whatever you want. You know, even if I feel uncomfortable, well, maybe I just need to learn a different way. Maybe it's a culture thing, you know, like maybe it's the way I was raised. Who am I to know what I really want, kind of thing. But I will tell you, I had an experience the other day where I was walking the dog. This dog, man. This is why it's like, I can't believe we actually named him Hero, and it is this hero saga, this hero's journey, but it's the revised version of the journey. It's not about going out, overcoming, and then coming back with this wisdom. It's actually about going out, bumping into this adversity, being super confused, having to work out the fact that you were the hero all along. All this other stuff coming at you was actually, it's like the virus program, right? The virus program is what releases out that virus. Where is this within you? These people that are in your life are here to teach you this and to show you this, where you need to let go of. So it's almost like, yay, thank you for making me feel like shit. Where is this in me that I keep allowing this? Not allowing as in, where is it unseen in my consciousness, right? That's what I mean by that. It's not like, of course, you don't purposely want to hurt yourself and allow yourself to be treated this way. But here's how it plays out, right? This is what's so tricky. So I was at the pond walking with the dog, and I saw this man coming up, and I thought, again, this is in hindsight. I remember thinking, like, of course, in light of everything that's going on in the world right now, right? I remember thinking, like, gosh, it would be really nice to have friends and people in my life who weren't all just like me and looked just like me, So I saw this man approaching, and okay, I think I will often do this. It's like, do people want to interact? Are they going to say hi? It's like you're kind of looking to see, like, feeling each other out, whatever. Because lots of people do want to talk, and especially with the dog, it seems to be an attractor now. It's like I've met so many people, even just on my own street in my neighborhood, that I had never met before since we've acquired this animal. So he's like this big equalizer. So saw this man coming up, didn't see a reaction from him, so I just kind of whatever passed by. Several yards later, all of a sudden he's saying something to me, and I was like confused about what he was even asking me, because it was something about the dog, and talking about like his coat, or like did he have a bath, or like what's going on, because he looks okay but he looks something, and I was like, what are you, like, what's going on here? So I don't know, just to the story, it's like he loves dogs, right? He has all these pictures of people's dogs, and like he just loves them, and he knows a lot about them, and like there's something wrong with his coat, like I wasn't brushing him enough or something, and asking me like when's the last time. But he had just had a bath, because this was like right after he had come home, and so they did like the undercoat thing too, right? Like taking all that out. So still not quite sure what his, like, anyway, talking about my grooming habits with him or something like this. So, and then he's telling me like, oh, I have all these friends, and like where he works, he just meets all kinds of people. So he's showing me like all these pictures of him with people and with their dogs, and like all these people who are his friends, right? And he keeps saying to me, it's okay, I'm friends with everyone. Look, I have all these pictures, it's okay, like I'm safe. And I'm thinking, yeah, I know, based on everything that's going on right now, like it's a little weird. And he's like, yeah, he's like, especially like white women, they don't want to talk to me and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, understandable, but he kept saying like, it's okay. And I'm like, that's fine. And we kind of just started walking and talking about all these things, and whatever, ended up parting ways. And he's like, I'm here every day, whatever, between these hours and whatever. And I'm like, usually I'm not there that late, because I get up early and do my thing and whatever. So, and the next day I was definitely planning on not being there that late, but it ended up like, whatever happened, I'm like, oh God, I have to go take the dog for a walk. Ended up running into him again, right? And so he's like, oh, hey, he's like, I saw someone who looked just like you, had a dog that looked just like you, and I was trying to say hi to her, and like, she responded, but then she was like kind of cold, and I was like, what, so it confused me with someone else, and we were talking and like all this stuff, and there got to be a point where I was like, okay, I'm done, I need to go. And he starts saying these things to me like, oh, is there a man, like, is this the and I was like, all of a sudden he's saying all this weird shit to me, and I'm like, how did we jump to this topic now, right? And so this is where like these red flags started going off for me, because I was like, I didn't say anything about anything. I just was like, I'm tired, I'm behind, maybe a little bit of a language barrier, right? A little bit of trouble understanding each other's accents. I was like, I have to go, you know, and he's, oh, come on, let me take a picture. And I'm, you know, it's like, I've known you for like maybe 20 minutes total. And I don't even take pictures of myself. I don't have, you know, it's like, it's not something I do. I'm definitely not comfortable with you taking my picture. You know, he's like, it's okay. I'm not taking a video. It's just a picture. And, you know, it just dawned on me that, again, in light of everything that's been going on in the world, it's like, yes, I want to be more open to people. But this is what always seems to get me in trouble in the world. It's like, I want to be understanding, and I know that I understand. We all have wounding and we all have pain, right? And I think so many of us come from this perspective where we do love everyone. It's just a natural state of our being, right? But then there are bad seeds everywhere, right? Like there's good white people, there are good bad people, or bad white people. There are good bad people. There are bad seeds in every kind of culture, race, whatever it may be, you know, and it's not about what is the color of your skin or what is your accent or, you know, what are you doing? It's about, are you violating my boundaries though, you know? And I can see where there's so much craziness going on right now, where we're all kind of like walking on eggshells. But what it comes down to is like, listen, I have a right to my own personal space. And just because you feel you're a safe person doesn't mean I have to take your word for it. And this is the kind of trap that I think I have found myself in so many times, where I want to be open and I want to be accepting and I want to be loving. But the second that I tend to do that, something comes in that's like, oh, I can be in your space now, right? And this is where I'm saying it's like, if we're not fully in our power, not fully in our energy, they will find this way in, right? Like, I probably should have said no to the camera or the pictures or the phone a long time ago, right? Like, why are you pulling this out and like you want to take a picture of the dog? Like, I don't even know you, you know? And I wouldn't, and naturally just people in my experience do not do that. You know, you talk to someone, then if you see them several times and you have conversations, like it naturally progresses into that. It's not, I'm okay, look at how I'm okay, I'm showing you all these things that mean that I'm a good like that's for me to decide, not you, you know. And so I almost felt like this was some kind of weird test, because I was like, oh yeah, I'm open and look at what's happening now. I'm in my light and I'm in my power, and just all these people are like, I'm meeting them and it's been so wonderful. And now I have all these friends of whatever, you know, and it just did not pan out that way at all. In fact, I felt quite uncomfortable for the rest of the day. It's like he had given me this hug, and like now I have this cologne on my shirt all day long, and it was just kind of making me a little bit sick. It's like, and I had to think in my mind, like, am I being, you know, prejudiced? Am I being judgmental that I'm not allowing someone to like come and hold me and hug me, like pushing this person like away from me, you know? No, there's still personal boundaries. And I think this is one of the ways that we have been tricked over and over, right? Wanting to be and appear loving and open and accepting to all people all the time, right? But there are people who don't know their own light. They're not connected to their own light. And this is when they come in and they just kind of overtake us, because they don't have what they're actually seeking from us, right? And it's not about the fact that we don't have good boundaries, right? It's just about the fact that we're not recognizing that they are actually disconnected, when what they want from us is really this connection into the light, right? And they're not able or capable of seeing it for themselves, because what he actually started telling me, it was very interesting the second day, this quick conversation, like, again, I don't even know how this stuff comes up. He would just start saying all these things, and he said, oh, he's like, well, I have a wife, but she's living in this other town, and like, I had this job when I lived in the other country that I'm from, and he was saying that he worked for the union, so he would counsel all of these people, all of these women for this union, right? So they would call him all the time with their problems, and like that was his job or something, but this also seemed to be after hours they were calling him. I don't really know. And I'm thinking, okay, in retrospect now, in hindsight, right, I'm thinking, okay, he clearly has an issue with boundaries with women. Whether or not that is your job, you know, there is a line where that has to end and your personal relationships have to take priority. And if those people are not feeling comfortable with what you're doing, obviously we have to have a conversation. We have to see what's going on here, right? Because in any situation, there shouldn't be any kind of charge. It should feel neutral. So clearly other things going on there, right? But in my desire to be this person who opens their heart to everyone, right? And not be judgmental, what I was really doing was just allowing his personality and his energy to come in and just overtake me. Instead of saying, hey, you know what? Let's not do the phone. Let's not do that. Like, we can walk and have a conversation. That's totally fine. But when you start like, I'm okay, I'm not taking a video, I just want to take pictures. Look, I have lots of pictures. Well, that may be the way you operate. That's not how I operate, right? But I made this allowance, right? Like, this is how this person is showing up. Let me just let that come in and be my experience. And I should have never allowed that, right? But not wanting to appear, again, in the time that we are in, it just felt a little bit tricky, you know? It's like, okay, where do I say no? Like, I really am kind of feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but questioning, is it because I don't want to appear judgmental or racist or something like this, right? Like, all these things are going through my head. So it's a strange time for sure, but also showing us exactly what we need to know about ourselves and where to disconnect from these programs. So, you know, this is really long-winded today, but I just feel it is, I guess I can't stress enough what this journey is, and that it comes in our daily experiences, right? It's not just about having that energetic download and waking up to these new ideas. We have to learn to put them into practice, and we have to learn how we continually get pulled into these places, right? We are by nature people pleasers. That it's what we're here to do, right? Is to assist other people, but not in the way where we become the victim and we succumb to their energy, where their energy takes the priority over us, right? We're so used to doing that. Like, let me climb up on the cross for you. Let me listen to your problems. Okay, fine. But there's a time and a place for that. And you can't just come in and take over my whole experience in my life because they look like a nice person that's going to listen, you know? But again, that's my tendency. That's what I'm having to learn, is like, where do I say, look, I have my own life. I have my own way of being. I understand you are who you are the way you are, but we're not going to become enmeshed, right? This is this codependency. This is this narcissism. This is this dysfunction. And it's time for me to stand in my power and in the truth of who I know that I am, and to say, okay, I respect who you are, but you need to keep your dysfunction on that side of the road. And if you're going to come into my life, you're going to have to meet me where I am. It's not just about me, you know, changing to meet your needs. I'm sorry if this is how you feel. I'm not coming from a place of wanting to push you away or make you feel less than or anything. But when we stand in our light, and this is what's challenging, right? We have to understand too, is that we have to stand in our light, and people naturally have to attune to that if they are going to be close to us. Where in the past, again, like I said, we would just take it in and suddenly we're feeling like shit. They're feeling better, right? Because they're taking our energy and they're going off and they're like, oh, wow, I feel great. I mean, I've had best friends like this, right? Like, drop of a hat, they'll be there for anything I need. But then why did I feel like death every time they left, you know? And I had to learn that lesson. It was really hard and sad because, yeah, I want to have people in my life, right? But when it's people who overtake, who move into your space, right, energetically, we're not, if we continue to allow that, we're really going to feel shitty, you know? So this time is about seeing all these kind of manipulations and how they come in and how we get pulled into it, because this is the time to stand in our placement, on our platform, on our foundation, and shine our light. And everyone needs to go through this too, right? Everyone needs to learn this for themselves. If they can't learn it, you know, they have to go another round of being in whatever mess they're in. It's not for us to fix. And we've learned this over and over, right? It's like, it's really hard to be in this density, be in the dysfunction, and try and help other people. Down there, we have to be up in our light, and people need to attune to that correct way of being. And this is the trick, right? It's like, we are within the origin, within the correction, and we have to understand that. It's the reverse of what we've been experiencing, what we've been feeling, and what we've been thinking. And it's like, it is about flipping our minds into this other way. So, okay, I'm going to stop because I feel like I'm just rambling right now. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Take good care. We'll talk soon.